Fighting back against a seemingly insurmountable enemy is a heroic and wickedly awesome thing to do. However, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. Sometimes life is just plain difficult, which is too bad, especially when the character you've been cheering for the whole time ends up going under. Yeah, we're talking about the top 5 final girls in horror movies who didn't make it. Coming in at number 5, we've got Helen Lyle from Candyman. In the end, Helen did what she had to do. It took her a little while to figure out exactly what that meant, but I'm still glad she made it happen. Helen Lyle isn't your traditional final girl. She isn't thrust into a situation by accident, nor is she especially resourceful in her dealings with Candyman. She was destined to be targeted by this hook-handed urban legend, and it's up to her to save pretty much everyone but herself. In the beginning, she was simply looking for information on urban legends for her research. Probably took it a little too far, too, stumbling across a fake Candyman who was willing to exact some very real violence. However, in the end, Helen did indeed find the true urban legend himself. She was the only one to face him head on though. Everyone else in her life found themselves at the business end of a meat hook. One by one, people important to Helen died, all while she was blamed for the violence, and also blamed for the kidnapping of a baby. So what's a researcher to do? Well, Helen slowly discovers Candyman's backstory and gets closer to him. She finds out about his tragic past, his art, his lost love, his horrible death, and in doing so, she realizes that he wants her. He's destroying everything around her, so she has nowhere else to go. Baiting her with the kidnapped infant, the Candyman decides at the last moment to go back on his promise to Helen and attempts to burn her alive. Helen manages to save the baby, but ends up dying in the fire. However, death isn't the end for Helen. Although she doesn't technically make it, she does stick around in a different way. She's just like Candyman now. A local legend who can be summoned by saying her name 5 times in front of a mirror. She even makes it into a new mural depicting her in all white, hair ablaze. Now the final girl has become a villain in her own right. She's gotta go make sure some more final girls don't make it. But first, she's gonna go kill her ex. That's the important one. Coming in at number 4, we've got Siobhan from Sea Fever. You know, this one might not actually be that bad. Like, of course it's bad that our protagonist doesn't make it in the end, but hear me out. Siobhan is an excellent researcher. Cream of the crop. Top notch. Best of the best. To be so great at research though, she has to give up some other things. She's kinda awkward around her colleagues and tends to keep to herself most of the time. But that's the way she likes living, especially because it allows her to find patterns and learn new things about wildlife. You do you, Siobhan. After boarding the fishing trawler that she'll spend the next little while upon, she realizes that it's gonna be a little awkward. However, this doesn't mean that she doesn't care for her shipmates. Quite the opposite, actually. She wants to help everyone to be as safe and useful as possible during the trip. After they discover some strange breaches in the hull, things get weird. Siobhan does all she can to figure out exactly what these bioluminescent apparitions are and eventually realizes that everyone's in danger. This glowing goop is full of tiny organisms that'll take over your body and blow your eyeballs out of your skull. Knowing that everyone else on board probably won't be able to figure out how to deal with this deep sea threat, Siobhan takes the lead. She finds out that you can see if someone's infected by taking a close look at their retinas and realizes that the ship's water filtration system is definitely full of these creatures. Disinfectant and UV light do nothing, so she gets Omid to rig up the arc welder to shock the things to death. This works, but the rest of the crew refuses to quarantine, leading Siobhan to scuttle the boat. A good call for humanity at large, if we're being honest. As the rest of the crew goes crazy or straight up dies, she finds out that one creature did survive and has grown large enough to eat through the ship's hull, sinking the ship. In a last-ditch effort to prevent this thing from making it anywhere else, Siobhan and Omid ignite the trawler and hop into a lifeboat. Siobhan, like the kick-ass final girl she truly is, rescues Omid from the creature one last time, gets cut, realizes she's infected, and swims down into the depths towards the strangely beautiful beast. She doesn't survive, but damn does she make sure no one else gets ruined, and she gets to see her research subject right up close. Coming in at number 3, we've got Sarah from The Descent. Technically, Sarah could have survived, and if you go by the fact that there's a sequel featuring Sarah, then yeah, she made it, but that's the lame ending, alright? The real ending is where it's at. So much more emotional weight, so much more punch. So let's start from the start. Sarah is a very unfortunate person. Her husband cheats on her, which results in a tense moment in the car, which causes an accident, which kills him and their daughter. Then a year later, Sarah is invited to go caving with all of her pals. They're hoping to have a good time and see Sarah happy for the first time in a while, and Sarah just wants to disengage. It's too bad that Juno brought them to an unknown cave system full of crawlers. Not exactly the fun-filled time they were all expecting. From here, there are two theories, although they both end with Sarah hallucinating in the cave. Either the crawlers are real and Sarah actually fights her way through them until the bitter end, or Sarah imagined the crawlers in a fit of hysteria and killed all of her friends. Both are pretty wild and do indeed leave Sarah as the final girl. And again, we're going by the original better ending here. No escape. The car's a dream. Sarah's back in the cave imagining her daughter's birthday. It's bleak, but why wouldn't a story like this be? Coming in at number 2, we've got Dana Polk from The Cabin in the Woods. Joss Whedon's love letter to horror is an incredibly rich text, like it should be studied by horror fans the world over, whether or not you like it. It might not be the greatest movie of all time, but it so expertly uses all of the tropes and traditions of the genre in both subversive and easy to understand ways. One of these classic horror movie tropes is to use stock characters, but not just any stock characters that are both not as straightforward as they look and exactly as you would expect them to be. So we get the jock, but he's actually really smart, but he's made to act more jock-like. Then we've got the queen bitch, but actually she's super lovely to everyone she meets, even though she's turned into like the sex object. Then there's the goofy stoner who manages to see everything as it is, even as he's smoking copious amounts of weed. And of course there's the virginal final girl who isn't so virginal after all. Poor Dana. Forced into the role of the virgin by powers beyond her control. But in the end, she does take control. By surviving alongside Marty, she manages to outwit the secret organization pulling the strings behind the scenes and make it to the bitter end. However, in realizing exactly what's going on, she decides that it's not worth it to go through with the ritual. Taking fate into her own hands, she and Marty take one last toke as the world ends around them. She could have made it, but instead decides to let the old ones destroy everything. Wicked. And coming in at number 1, we've got Christine Brown from Drag Me to Hell. Well, we should have all seen this one coming based on the title, but hey, sometimes people don't get dragged to hell. Unfortunately, this is not one of those situations. After spending the entire run of the movie trying to make up for denying an old woman's mortgage extension, Christine realizes she goofed up in handing off an envelope. This minor mistake means the curse was never actually lifted, and all of a sudden, hell opens up below her. Hands reach up from the portal, dragging poor Christine to hell. After all that, eh? Poor gal. She survived for so long, figuring out how to lift the curse and did her best to make everything right, and she still ends up being dragged to hell. I suppose it would have been disappointing if she didn't end up embodying the title though, right? Bummer. It's always memorable when a final girl ends up dying before the finale, don't you think? But it usually sticks out because you like the character and are distressed with their peril. Oh well, there's always next time. Or a sequel that will retcon whatever happened. So, what'd you think of the list? Who's the greatest final girl of all time, and what's the best final girl death? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more uninhibited ones from the top 5 winter SCP monsters. Ducks Rule Florida says everyone. Having a nice family dinner. Me. You know, 45% of Mount Everest is probably bodies. Alright, so add that to the list of things to avoid discussing on Thanksgiving. Here for it says It's a Small World is scarier than anything on this list. But is it scarier than the Duloc puppet show from Shrek? Silva Podolska says my father works in SCP Foundation. Wicked, dude. My uncle works for Nintendo and he gave me a Switch 2 for my birthday. Now you can't see it, just trust me, it's real. Rodney Kelly says there's no business like snow business. Jack Frost, is that you? And Zachzilla1 says 4666 is super messed up. I'm glad I don't live in the middle of nowhere surrounded by snow. I'd have to stay up for 12 days clutching a rifle. Well, there are other reasons to be glad you're not living in the middle of nowhere surrounded by snow, but good luck shooting the Yule Man down. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm gonna throw some lawn darts straight up in the air and see where they land. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.